What do you get when two non-believers read the Bible?
Eating the apple.
Welcome to Eating the Apple. I'm Chris,
I'm Jeff.
and we are two non-believers. We're reading the Bible to see if just a plain reading will convert us to Christianity. We're not doing this in a snarky way. This is a serious effort. It started because I had a new neighbor moving across the street, and one day my son was outside walking my dog, and they yelled over, and said, "Hey, do you read the Bible?" Just out of nowhere. And I was like, oh man, this is going to set it off. And it's been a long time since I've read the Bible. I have read it all the way through, but I've forgotten most of it. And I wanted to refresh, and I wanted to do it with my cousin because I wanted to dialogue things out and talk about it rather than just my own interpretation. And I didn't want to go to, a church or something and do the same thing because I wanted to get his take on it rather than just a believer.
And I was receptive to that idea because I've long been feeling that knowledge of the Bible in my various reading and studying has been lacking. And I feel like it's important to understand where folks come from. There's a lot of believers, especially here in North Texas, where I'm from. Where I am, who's just general, like the way they present themselves, their entire lifestyle is sort of centered around belief in the Bible and God. So yeah, I think it's a worthwhile endeavor, and I'm looking forward to getting going.
Yeah, and we don't live in the same areas. I'm on the East Coast and whatnot, and so we had to do this online. So we figured we'd just go ahead and put it up as a podcast. And then if anybody, finds it and can get some use out of it, that would be awesome. But primarily I'm doing this for me. It's just for my own knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm same here. I'm doing it to expand my own worldview and knowledge base. And at the same time, if there's anybody that can get some sort of use out of it, then that'll be exceptional. I'd love to have somebody gain something from it. if it's not just me and you.
Well, I do think before we begin that it's important to state a couple of things that have some bearing on this podcast.
Okay.
First, I want it to be absolutely clear I'm not a theist. I used to be. There's been periods in my life where I was very committed to this, but it just hadn't worked out for me. What I mean specifically is that I don't have a belief in any gods. To clarify, it means that I have not been convinced by any proof or explanation of a god or supernatural being that has been presented to me yet. Many would say that means I'm an agnostic, but I would disagree. I live my life as if no gods have any influence over my life or my decision making. So a more accurate description is that I am an atheist. As for the Bible and its claims, I'm not convinced. And that's what it comes down to. Any of the significant claims are not factual, as for the Bible and its claims, I'm not convinced any of the significant claims within its covers are factual. For example, I'm happy to admit that Jericho existed, but the claim that the walls fell after some people walked around it for a while, that's going to take some convincing. As for the big question, was Jesus a real person? I'm not a mythicist. And similar to the Jericho situation, I'm happy to grant that a man lived and preached and gained some followers back in the day, but any of the miracle stuff is a whole nother story altogether. So the reason I'm here is to learn about the Bible and its claims because the society in which I live in is steeped in the Bible. I have read it in its entirety before, but knowledge is one of those things that just, if you don't use it, you lose it. You really do. And I've lost most of mine. This may show itself over the course of this podcast, although I'm going to try to prevent it, or else I'll just find myself in the same place in a few years' time. I want to undertake this reading of scripture in a serious manner, although I'm not going to be editing myself as to its content or what I dig out of the various rabbit holes this sends me down. I've got a book called The Anatomy of God, which is amazing so far, and it talks about the parts of the Bible and the history that we know about that describes God's body parts to demonstrate that he had a body rather than being this, invisible being in the sky or whatever. So those kind of things are going to bleed in a little bit. I'm going to try to keep them out, but it's going to sink in. My contention is that the Bible is only really believable if the reader already believes it. And that's how the 2 times that I was a Christian, that's how it happened. I allowed myself to believe. I said, okay, if this is correct, then this is correct. And this is what it says about this. And it all makes sense. And I allowed myself to be convinced. And then it just kind of wore off. So I look forward to see if that holds again. If I become a believer at the end of this, so be it. I don't expect it, but there's that.
Yeah, that's fair. I appreciate that. So you mentioned that you were a Christian twice before. It's interesting that you can quantify that. So like, does that mean like that you had a belief, then it ended, and then you gained the belief back and then lost it again?
Yeah, pretty much. I was kind of born into it, and just, I don't know how to put it. I just kind of drifted away. And then I came back to it. I had a youth pastor at the local church, come up to me and my friends when we were playing outside. I was 10 or 11 years old, I guess, and started talking to us. My mom let me go to church. It was literally across the street. And, I got super into it, and I cried, and I, asked Jesus into my heart and all that stuff. And then I read the Bible, and it, that's when I lost my faith again.
Wow.
It admittedly was probably not for great reasons. The biggest reason I have now is I'm just simply not convinced any of it's true. Any other reasons are kind of ancillary to that, but that's the big thing for me.
I guess to lay my foundation, I'll say that I have a curiosity about where we come from, and is insofar as that has a bearing on where we're going. I'd like to be as enlightened as possible about all those things. I depend on intuition that has been honed by what science can identify in nature as explanations for natural phenomena. I have a hunch that what we don't yet know about reality can be analyzed and explained using those methods. I don't have many beliefs, but among them is the belief that every individual has the right to believe what they choose, so long as their beliefs and the actions that result from those beliefs don't infringe on other people's rights to do the same.
Yeah.
I believe that we should proportion the strength of our beliefs with the strength of the evidence that we've encountered, and that evidence to the contrary should not only be accepted but sought. I think that by walking a mile in each other's shoes, we can eschew apathy for empathy. The reason why I wanted to undertake this project is to close the gap in my understanding between or of the topics that I don't know, and just try to countenance with vigor and alacrity the claims and supposed facts that the predominating members of Western culture espouse. I want to try to reduce the amount of othering and misinformation that proliferates when we stop listening to one another, and by extension, try to reduce suffering. My intuition tells me that the Bible the Bible alone is not all that's necessary to obtain a belief in God, and so the idea behind this podcast is to try to test that directly.
Yeah.
As far as like a history of belief, I can't say that I've ever had one. I was raised for a significant portion of time in my teenage years by 2 pastors, and the idea was for me to the one contingency that I was given as a prerequisite to be allowed to live with them was that I had to go to church with them, and it was like the first time I'd ever been to proper church with the intention to not learn but to believe, right? Like I have a friend that says that church is for believers, and I understand. Yeah. So going to church then was less about like the novelty and the interest, like, how neat and different is this, but more about, no, you're here to worship, So that was the only time in my life I've ever experienced that, and though I tried very hard, it's never something that ever came natural to me. I never felt anything. And I would bring that up to people at church, and they would say, like, just wait, or don't. I got varying levels of you're asking the wrong questions or you're asking too many questions. So it just never came. Never got it. And I've always, since then, I guess, I've always wondered, like, maybe there's something I'm doing wrong. And so that's part of why I'm doing this is I want to make sure, like, I'm going to do what I can only assume is the best I can. Right. I'm not going to set projects aside and set family time aside to do this. I feel like if God wants me to believe, then I'll believe, so.
Yeah, I'm kind of laughing internally here because when you said you didn't really have a history of, belief or anything like that growing up. It popped into my head. I hadn't thought about this probably since it happened. But back when I was in that, like, the youth pastor's, influence or whatever, you and my brother and I tried to read the Bible. I remember this. I was like 10, so y'all were like 6 or 7 tops. And we would sit outside your apartment on the steps and try to read the Bible, and we'd read a passage and be like, let's highlight that. And just for no reason. There was no like rhyme or reason at all to what we were highlighting. And then in the course of that, it only lasted probably 3 days, but in the course of that, I had some Magic the Gathering cards, and it was back when they were like brand new. These cards are probably worth a little bit of money now. And we burned them because we thought they were evil, and then we got scared because we thought burning them would release the demons.
Oh my God. I definitely remember the Magic cards. I'm having a hard time remembering the Bible portion of it.
Yeah, like I said, it didn't last very long. But
yeah, that's so funny.
It just popped into my head.
That's interesting to think about who modeled that behavior for us, the highlighting the Bible. Like, that must have been something you gleaned from church or something, right?
Probably.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Because now, like, I've been doing some studying leading into this project, and like, I have 8 different colors of highlighters because I want to make sure that I know that these things tie in together. And like, so I just, as a 6-year-old, I wonder where I was like, that sounds important. Oh, it says God here. Oh yes. Well, I must highlight that.
Yeah.
So that's pretty good, man. Man, I wish I had a more indelible memory of that. We went with Eating the Apple as a title for the podcast. Do you remember how that came to be?
Not entirely. I don't know. The words coming to mind is poetic, and that's not what I mean, but it is a little bit poetic. But it's it kind of fits just perfectly because we're eating the apple of knowledge, or we're trying to, and so it just seemed perfect to me.
I think, we're basically just like it takes place at the beginning of the book. We're kind of beginning this anew. We're kind of come to this whole thing like bare and brand new. So to me, that helped to really emphasize that as a title. So speaking of like whether or not it was actually an apple, how do you intend to interpret what we read as we study?
Oh yeah, I mean, I know there's lots of people out there that take the Bible literally. There are others that take some parts literally and some parts figuratively or metaphorically. I just can't do it literally. I mean, I can do it as an intellectual exercise for trying to understand things a little bit better, but until I'm convinced that any of it's true, I just can't internalize that, specifically because, how do you tell what's literal and what's not? There are some things in there that are clearly metaphor.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I don't mind. I mean, to provide sort of a counterweight, I wouldn't mind taking everything literally, just because it'll make it easier for me as I read to not have to wonder if I'm like, when you take things metaphorically, it's almost like a free pass. It seems you're allowed to just interpret things as you wish, and it requires you to add context either through your own beliefs, which can be flawed, or through historical context.
Well, that's true, but I won't be taking it necessarily metaphorically either. I think there are parts that are clearly metaphors, like the parables of Jesus and stuff. I don't think Jesus was intending to say that there actually was, whatever. But I'm going to be reading it as literature and not necessarily metaphor.
Got it. Okay, very good. It's kind of up to us to decide. I mean, some people, I'm sure folks read the Bible and take it all as literal, and that's what it takes to get them to believe or to enforce it, to help to provide structure for their beliefs. Others use it as metaphor because were they to take it literally, they couldn't believe, so they have to take it as metaphor in order for it to make sense. So
That's true.
I think either way is fine. And it really, we're going to read it however we want we're going to read it in the way that makes sense to us in order to have it apply to the thing that we're doing, So, well, who are we besides us, who are we wanting to, who are we hoping finds this interesting or useful?
Well, like I said, I'm going to be doing this for me essentially, but because we live in different states, we have to do it all online anyway. We might as well put it up as a podcast. And if anybody, that wants to learn more, I know there's going to be people out there that are, kind of rage watching to see if these atheists get, converted or whatever. And that's fine. And if it helps them as well to maybe take a tempered look at things because of our positions, then great. And if there are other people that are not believers, not necessarily atheists, but, just people that are not believers in Christ that, can take this and learn some more from it, whether they get converted or not, it's up to them. But, just anybody that could use the knowledge. Yeah. There's tons of podcasts and videos and everything out there from believers explaining the Bible. There's plenty from atheists explaining how the Bible's not true. And, I want to take a measured approach to it. I just want a plain reading to see, one, for my knowledge, and also to see, if I do get converted. Yeah. I don't expect it, but.
Right. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with seeing if a hypothesis holds true. And as such, I think we're both, we both sort of speak a more scientific language when it comes to how we come to know things, our personal epistemologies. So, I just can't find any flaw with doing it the way that we're doing it. Also acknowledging that we are biased, but we're doing the best. We're going to do the best we can to be as measured and honest as possible. That's the whole idea for me. Right. I want to make sure that we're, approaching it with some sense of honesty and fairness, steel manning, so on and so forth. We're not philosophers. We're not scientists. We're just two lay people reading a text that has influenced the world.
I think we need to let everybody know that these are going to be uploaded to YouTube. It's going to be a weekly show. We are going to let you know what the reading is at the end of the episode before. We're planning on doing this over 3 years, once a week over 3 years. You can read it beforehand, or if we say something interesting, you want to go back and look it up, we'll have it in the description. That's going to be the format, essentially. We're going to start the reading ourselves at the homework, and then we're just going to come in and talk about it, and the things that we find interesting or the things we have questions about, things we want to discuss. That's going to be essentially the show.
Right. And then hopefully you can get some feedback as far as the methodologies that we've used, the conclusions that we've drawn.
Absolutely.
That's going to be essential. Aside from that, that's episode 1 is slated to be Genesis 1 through 11. So we're going to go from creation through the Tower of Babel. And that's going to be the episode will be just the discussion of those things. So hopefully we can bring a clear and recent lens to it so that we're not relying too much on memory and past experience. But
it's a lot of history to cover.
The Bible, it starts at 11. It's like, here's everything that happened. And it does its best to get you brought up to speed. All right. I think that about does it. Until next time, I'm Jeff, and this has been Eating the Apple.